Have you ever worked a job that you hated so much that you decided to just rage about it on Facebook or Twitter? Maybe you were just incredibly outspoken about your job and you were like, screw this, right? Like, I don't like it here and I need to vent. Well, that's not something AEW talent could do. And there's a new report from Fightful that has a lot of people talking. And honestly, I kind of want to do a deep dive on this. According to Fightful, Bryan Danielson, he is part of this disciplinary committee in AEW. And part of that role actually includes handing out fines to talent from AEW who post egregious social media posts. And so far, there's actually been 2 people who have already been fined for their social media posts, but at this time, it's unknown who has been fined or what exactly has been posted. Now, contrary to that report, Dave Meltzer has also come out, and Brian Alvarez and Meltzer have basically said that the reports are overblown, and Bryan Danielson is not the one who's necessarily handing out the fines himself. Bryan Danielson has confirmed that he is part of the committee in a recent interview. And honestly, I thought this was funny, but at the same time, too, I think the IWC is trying to make this like an absolute big deal. And at the end of the day, I find that really silly. Now, look, let me be very clear. I think talent speaking out on their company, it's not a good look for the company. It's not a good look for the workplace. It's not a good thing at all. And quite honestly, sometimes it doesn't even make the talent look good, right? Because if you're a talent who's coming across as whiny, complainy, things like that, obviously that can get people to have a different perception of you. Now, this is not a clear-cut argument. I think there is reasons for people to be upset, but I would much rather see that things get handled internally. Not everything needs to be discussed on social media. Not everything has to be blown up on social media, because I think it's really easy to look at a couple words in a tweet and just think that somebody is disgruntled. And we're actually already seeing this. There was a deleted tweet from Mike Santana who, it's strange, but he hasn't been on TV since his match with Ortiz in Rampage, and he had a tweet, and it was just simple. It said 6 weeks, and there was an emoji next to it, and the tweet was deleted. Then you have guys like AR Fox who are liking tweets based on the CM Punk drama, and there was a tweet more specifically where it was about CM Punk being disgruntled and why he had every reason to be disgruntled, and AR Fox had liked the tweet. So there's a lot of people paying attention to the social media aspect of things, and obviously fans are going to read a lot into it. But look, at the end of the day, you want the company to look good. You don't want the company to look bad, and these tweets definitely do that. Now, Bryan Danielson being part of the disciplinary committee is also getting a lot of strange traction on social media, because here's the thing. Bryan Danielson, a veteran of the business. Bryan Danielson worked in WWE, knows what it's like to be a top guy in the WWE, and ultimately when he came to AEW, he felt like he wanted to be a part of that company's growth. Having a talent in the disciplinary committee could actually form some really strange relationships with the talent. It could definitely put a strain on those relationships, because no matter what, you're always going to be looked at as the bad guy. And I find that to be a very difficult position for a talent to be in, because ultimately, if you think about it, I mean, and it's really no different than like the Young Bucks or Kenny being executive vice presidents of the company. A lot of guys that are hired into the company are friends of the elite. And at the same time, too, you want your relationship as a friend to be good. You want it to be positive. You also don't want it to be a scenario where like you're pissing off your friends, but at the same time you're trying to conduct business and make business better overall. So I understand all sides of the argument, but for AEW, I think a lot of fans are really trying to paint AEW in a negative light here, and it's not something I'm necessarily comfortable with doing. Because for the most part, you shouldn't, if you're running a business, you want your business to look good. You don't want situations to pop up in a negative light. I mean, look at the Ryback and WWE situation. Ryback has had a very public feud with the WWE for years now. And in the process, a lot of people really turned on Ryback. But also, for those who really paid attention to it, some people are looking at WWE as the enemy. So I'm one of those big believers in that if there's an issue with the company, if there's an issue with where you work or what you do, and it doesn't just apply to the wrestling industry, by the way, but if you have an issue that needs to be taken care of, you need to be communicating as much as possible with those in charge in order to see change. Because it's very easy these days to become reactionary. It's very easy these days to go on Twitter and say, I'm not being utilized or blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, you should be having those conversations behind the scenes. I think, a lot of wrestling fans are very well aware of what is happening on television, but also they're very well aware of what is happening backstage because there is a massive issue with things being leaked. And some things I believe are being leaked on purpose. I think some things are being leaked, in a sense where it's not as much on purpose, but things are being leaked. And really, one of the things that you want to do is try to prevent leaks as much as possible, because if you look at what's happened to AEW in the last few years, it's become very well known that they have issues backstage. And look, these are just reports, but when you see so many reports of backstage drama, backstage fights, backstage drama that leads to low morale, right? This is an up-and-coming business. They're trying to grow. The last thing you really want to do is make that impression on the fan base that things are not well ran there. And we saw how this impacted WWE as well. All the times that Vince McMahon was making last minute changes really turned off fans. And, even at that time, WWE stars really weren't being outspoken as much about WWE. And I think maybe there's a sense of fear in WWE, whereas there isn't in AEW. I think what's really going to make people fearful of speaking out about, their frustrations in a company creatively, it's fining them. And look, maybe fines aren't the greatest way to go about it. I think you should be building relationships to the point where you just avoid having problems in general. But if that's what Bryan Danielson and AEW have to do, then that's what they have to do. But don't get it twisted. They got to make sure their talent are happy. And I truly believe in the wrestling industry. I understand it's business. Business is business. But if you have talent, if you have writers, agents, wrestlers, it doesn't matter. If they are not happy in your company, I don't believe in this idea of forcing them to stay in a contract. I do not. And I understand that WWE for a long time, they didn't let people out. There was a couple scenarios in maybe which they did. But the idea of keeping somebody under contract, not utilizing them, they're frustrated, they're not happy at their job, I don't like that idea. And that's one of those things where I truly believe it is better to just fix the issues, do not let the issues get out of hand, and most importantly, work on that relationship so both sides are happy. Now, in regards to Bryan Danielson, I'm not going to lie. This whole thing has led to a ton of memes, a ton of funny posts on social media. Bryan Danielson's a very likable guy, a hell of a talent, and, he has a certain level of maturity and presence where I think people respect him. I hope whatever AEW does, it works out for them. But most importantly, I just hope that people who are frustrated in AEW don't even have to get to the point where they are tweeting on Twitter, where they are liking tweets that, maybe they agree with. I think the best thing that can happen is for people to come together, communicate, because communication is key in life, my friends. It's not just wrestling, it's not just work, but anything in life. You want better friendships, you communicate. You want better relationships with your loved ones, you communicate. You want a great job, you communicate with your boss. And then I think, man, after all this communication, after all this effort, if things aren't changing, then maybe that's when it's appropriate to get to Twitter. We'll see what happens. I like I said, the memes are absolutely funny, but this is just one of those things where, I would rather say, if I'm going to judge AEW, I'm going to judge AEW because of them creatively maybe not being as fulfilling. I'm not going to judge AEW if they have Bryan Danielson giving out fines. There's a larger, deeper-rooted issue that needs to be fixed. Bryan Danielson handing out fines that's not the problem. And the problem really stems from structure and the company maybe not as having a great communication system with their talent, which, we have heard in the past AEW has had some of those issues. They're a newer company. They got to figure that out. But that's what's most important here. Anyways, if you guys see the memes, enjoy them because they are pretty damn funny.